We are going to go ahead and get started. If my mental health team could unmute their themselves and their cameras, I'd like to introduce everybody. My name is Lisa Kelly, and I coordinate services, mental health services for Gahanna. And in doing that, I get to work with our fabulous counselors and our amazing school counselors. We are going to go ahead and get started. If my mental health team could unmute their themselves and their cameras. So like what's happening now is the Google is coming back. My name is Lisa Kelly, and I coordinate services, mental health services. Okay, so I'm going to just put that on pause for me. So right now I'd like to go ahead and introduce who we have here today. Andrea Johnson is our mental health specialist from Middle School South. You could wave. There she is. Holly Hobzek is our mental health specialist from Middle School East. If you could wave. And then we also have Lonnie Williams, who's our school counselor from Middle School East. And we have Darren Green, our middle school counselor from Middle School South. Emily Vargas, who is our mental health specialist from Middle School West, sorry. And then we also have Mr. Barboza joining us, who's the principal of Middle School East. Okay, so we are all going to mute ourselves and let Holly and Andrea take over.
So thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen that has our slide presentation on it. Sorry about that. Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear me. Andrea, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to say a few things about the current situation that we're all in, this current pandemic disaster, and talk about it and how it relates to stress and the stress response. So this disaster that we're currently undergoing is unlike other disasters in that they are not over. This disaster is not over in one day. Other disasters like floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, they end in a day and then the recovery starts. So this is very unique and very stressful in that the stress doesn't stop. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And so it just builds up, and that's what we mean by the stress response in the body. And so for parents,
Holly, I'm having people on the YouTube feed say that they can't hear you. So I don't know if you can get closer to try to magnify your voice.
Okay, I will try to do that. How is this?
I won't be able to tell because there's like a 10-second delay. So just
okay.
Why don't you just start over and
okay.
Start from the beginning and try to talk louder and closer to your microphone. Okay.
Okay. I'm doing both. So hopefully, hopefully this will help. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the current situation that all the parents are in, which is this current pandemic, which is a type of disaster. And it is related to our stress response and how we're responding. And this is unlike other disasters in that other disasters like hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, those are all over with in one day. And then the recovery starts. But this disaster is not over. And we don't know when it's going to be over. So that stress just keeps going and going and going. And so that's what we're feeling on a day-to-day basis because of the type of disaster that this is. So I just wanted to kind of define that for everyone as we move into our first slide. Caring for your mental health. It's the most important thing for parents to do right now is to prioritize their own mental health. You have to take care of yourself in order for you to be healthy and in a good mindset to take care of your children. So you really need to manage your adult worries. We have a tendency as parents to set everything aside, set our needs aside, set our worries aside in order to care for our children. But in this case, we cannot do that. You must process your own thoughts and feelings. It is not okay. I'm sorry, it is okay to be not okay right now. The more you avoid looking at your own stuff, your own needs, the more the stress builds up. And then you get into a pattern of chronic stress. And then those hormones build up and then they can significantly affect your mood and cognitive functioning. So as parents, we really need to focus on our mental health and do not leave resting or sleeping for the weekend. You need to do that on a day-to-day basis. So that has to be a priority. Healthy choices. All the literature about coping during and after disasters talk about the importance of physical movement. You don't have to run a mile. You can walk around the neighborhood or get some stretching in or do some yoga. Physical exercise releases endorphins, and those interact with your receptors in your brain and trigger a positive feeling in the body. So you will see Andrea and I both will be emphasizing, and I'm sure the other mental health specialists, the importance of physical exercise during this time of chronic stress. The other main thing you want to focus on is setting realistic expectations. You want to be mindful. Mindfulness is a really good tool to use to combat some of this chronic stress response. It can be used to build resilience during challenging times. Mindfulness is based on paying attention to how we relate to what's happening in the moment. And it also focuses on not being judgmental in the moment. That doesn't mean that you have to be calm all the time, or it doesn't mean that you have to be chipper and happy in spite of all of the uncertainty and fear. The important thing is to stay mindful and stay calm and grounded and being non-judgmental in the moment. And then also forgiving yourself if you do judge or you do make a mistake. That's also very important, is to be kind to yourself when you do make mistakes, and there will be many. So the next slide talks about setting boundaries. This is important, especially when you're at home with kids and you're trying to work. You want to set boundaries with them so that they know when you're available and at times when you're not available. So you may have to take a work call or do something important, and you might need time to yourself. So setting up some sort of system or even a visual cue to let them know that you need some work time or alone time would be helpful. Creating a new routine for yourself and your family is also a good idea. Right now, with all the uncertainty and stress, having a new routine for this pandemic would be very helpful, and post it somewhere so that everyone has access to it. You can make adjustments as you go. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We're in this for a long time. So be mindful of that. It's also important to stay connected with family and friends and social supports. Even though you might feel like you're in survival mode at times, that's all the more reason to schedule connections with others that can support you during this time. The need for this can increase or decrease depending on your level of stress on that day. Being aware of your needs as a parent is vital. And you should not feel guilty about taking care of your needs. Again, going back to that, us setting our stuff aside to take care of our children. It's kind of like when you're on the airplane and they tell you to put your mask on first so that you'll able to help your young person or your child. It's the same thing. You want to take care of your own needs so that you can be there for your young person. So the next slide is talking about setting small achievable goals. So make a schedule or a list for tasks that you want to accomplish that day, but be flexible. Be kind to yourself. If you go off schedule, that's okay. Be forgiving towards yourself. Don't be tied to the schedule. Find ways to manage the stress. Small things that you do throughout the day to regulate your own stress response. Normally, you might function well under stress, but remember, day-to-day stress is different from this type of chronic stress that's related to a disaster. So it's very important to manage that stress. Using mindfulness is a great way to manage the stress response. Mindfulness, taking mindfulness breaks throughout the day is a great way to do that. I don't know if many of you have seen, there's a commercial for the Calm app, and it's 15 seconds where the sound of rain comes on. I love that commercial. That always makes me stop and think for a few seconds of the soothing rain. So it's about creating those breaks for yourself throughout the day. Also, relaxing screen time with your middle schoolers is a good idea during this time. This can give you the extra time that you need to get some things done, whether it be work at home or work for your outside job. So thinking about doing that is also going to be positive. The next slide talks about more ways that you can access self-care for yourself. It's important to model this, as a parent, to model it for your young person. You might not have regular access to a gym right now due to things being closed, but there's lots of other things you can do physically to work out. There's a link on the slide for access to free workouts to do at home. You can also reach out to your child's school counselor, a clergy or spiritual leaders, connecting with family members, making appointments to do that. We just had a Google Meet with grandparents this weekend. So different ways you can connect with others. That's very important as well. So just using different resources to keep your self-care going is important. The next slide talks about focusing on managing your own stress and anxiety. Set aside a few minutes a day to work on the uncertainty of what's going on. That doesn't mean you have to go to the worst case scenario, but just focus a little bit, use that mindfulness. What is it like to be uncertain? And then choose when or if you're going to act instead of reacting emotionally. Uncertainty is here and it's going to be here for a while. And resilience relies on staying patient, alert, and grounded in the moment. So know what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot control. Make a list if you need to, and if you have to break it down hour by hour, that's okay as well. Setting boundaries and limits on what we're consuming over the news is very important, and this depends on your needs. Some feel empowered the more information that they hear or they get. Others are overwhelmed when they hear too much negativity and bad things that are being communicated and misinformation. So just being mindful and aware of how you regulate what and how much you're watching of news. Also, everyone in the family should pitch in, give your middle schoolers jobs and tasks to do. This helps build their self confidence and their resiliency, even if it's something small. Um, have them pitch in and help out around the house or help you with work tasks can be useful as well. So that is it for the adult parent portion. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea now, and she's going to talk a little more specifically about helping your children with their mental health. Go ahead, Andrea.
Okay, we intentionally talked about caring for your mental health before talking about how to care for your child's mental health, because during this time, your child's mental health will be impacted by your mental health. We often set the tone in our home, and our kids really do take their cues from us. So, as we begin this next part in this webinar, which is providing tips for caring for your child's mental health, we really can't stress enough that in order for you to ensure that you have the bandwidth you need to take good care of your family, you will need to prioritize your needs so that you'll be in a position to offer comfort and care to your kids when they need it. I would also remember that much of the personal time that was a part of our daily routines before, the commute time that we had, time alone at home or at the store, social time with friends, all of that is not available to us right now. And so this is why we really have to be intentional. I think that parents are hearing a lot about maintaining routines and schedules at home. And we want to emphasize that the schedule should be realistic. And some days we just have to adjust and adapt. And it is okay to throw a plan out the window and be flexible, because we are all going to have good days or bad days. Some days will be easy and some just won't. And perfectionism and the coronavirus just do not mix. So you really want to avoid burnout by being realistic when you think about your schedule, your family schedule, and really by practicing just self-compassion right now. Just remember that you are doing the best that you can. So when thinking about your student's schedule, it's really important to remember the importance of incorporating breaks. So instead of thinking of a school day devoted to learning from 9 to 3, I think it's important to think of it in terms of learning bursts, and teachers sometimes call this chunking. So your student should be engaged for a period of time that is realistic for their attention span, and then take a break. I have had quite a few conversations with parents that have really struggled to understand how they're going from a position of thinking about the school day, like I said, from a typical school hours to all of a sudden my child seems to need all of these breaks. And one of the things that I have encouraged parents to do is to keep in mind that during our children's school day, there are more breaks, I think, than what we realize. Just transitioning from one class period to the next is a break that they have in their day that they're not now maybe used to having at home. So it is okay, and it is important to have those breaks built in. And I would also encourage you to think about staggering their schedule with less preferred things being followed by highly preferred things. So if your student thinks about what their most difficult or least preferred work is, and does that at the beginning of their day or earlier in their day, they're likely to be more productive, because that's when their feelings of frustration or burnout with work are going to be less intense. They're not maybe having experienced that burnout just yet. Healthy habits are important for all of us, but they are particularly important for young people who are struggling with anxiety or depression. So I cannot encourage you enough to really think about enforcing those healthy habits at home. Research consistently demonstrates that sleep, diet, exercise impacts our mood, It impacts our ability to manage stress and to regulate emotions. So really important to encourage those healthy habits at home. Holly, if you move to the next slide for me, I wanted to make sure to say something about how, I've had some parents talk to me about how they're seeing maybe their child struggling or finding that they're providing a higher level of support that is difficult for them to maintain with their work schedule and all that we have going on as parents as well. So one of the things that I continuously encourage parents to do is to communicate with the school. If that is you and you see your child struggling in some way, or you feel like you are really providing a lot of support, that is difficult for you to maintain, communicate with the school. It's important for parents to know what role their child's teacher has provided to help them stay organized, to stay focused or on task at school, so that you know what role you may need to fill at home. So at the bottom of this slide, you'll see just a couple of examples of questions to ask so that you have a better understanding of how much assistance should you be providing your child for a particular subject that they seem to be coming to you quite a bit for help. So really monitoring what you're providing and checking in with the teacher regularly out if that is what you should be doing, if that's what they typically receive, and maybe what are some things that they have done for your child within the classroom to help them with their focus and how that can look for you at home. Okay, Holly, if you want to move, thank you. We understand, want to make sure that we just share that we do understand that it may be a challenge to get our teens or our young people to comply with the guidelines for physical distancing. Teenagers, I think, tend to feel invincible, and they are likely to be aware that the new coronavirus is not as problematic for their age range as it is for older people. So you may need to explain that you just can't know that your friends are well, and that many young people could be asymptomatic carriers. And while they may be comfortable taking that risk, they are also bringing that back into your house. I would also add that in having these conversations, it is important to meet our kids where they are at. So I wouldn't volunteer too much information, as this could be overwhelming, but I would invite your child to tell you anything that they may have heard and to talk about how they are feeling. And then you would want to answer those questions, not necessarily prompt their questions, but answer them and meet them where they are at. I think that given how much uncertainty there is right now, it is okay to say, I don't know, and teach our kids how to tolerate uncertainty and focus on what they do have control over. It's really important to remember that we're not just conveying the facts to our kids, but we're also setting the emotional tone. So that is something that we're also able to really help our kids with by setting that emotional tone when we're having the conversation, and really being in check of our own anxieties and how we're feeling. So that if I'm feeling anxious about some news that I just received, I'm taking time, just like Holly mentioned, to process those feelings and work through those before maybe then I'm having a conversation with my child and sharing some of that without meaning to, sharing some of that anxiety with them. I think also that for this age group, friends are so important, and they're supposed to be. Bonding with peers is one of the essential developmental tasks at this time for our kids. And so I would have conversations about how you can work together to make the situation more bearable. And this will likely mean loosening roles about time that maybe they have been allowed in the past to spend on social media, so that they can feel more of those social connections with their friends. And it is so important to validate their disappointments and losses right now. I think that for many, the most painful part of the coronavirus will be losing important experiences. So when we think about sports seasons, spring or summer activities, end of the year school events, I know that it's a huge loss for our kids, and they're really feeling it. And that disappointment definitely needs to be validated. And I think that it's especially problematic for teenagers who are wired in their brains to think about pleasure seeking and novelty to be limited in this way. So I just wanted to reiterate the importance of taking the time to really validate how they are feeling, and also that it is important to express confidence in their ability to rebound as well. Holly, do you want to go ahead and go to the next slide for me? Thank you. Also want to say that you want to remember that with sudden restrictions in place, changes in routine and all of the uncertainty, right now your child may be anxious and going through the different feelings and stages of grief that result from the losses that they are experiencing. And this may result in acting out. One of the things that we do know is that the research consistently shows that positive reinforcement and praise produces positive behavior changes more than what consequences do. So this is a time where we really want to heap on the praise. We want to use specific praise, labeled praise. And so instead of just saying good job, we want to be specific with our praise and let them know what it is that we thought they did a good job at, what it is that we appreciated about what we saw in them. And I think really focusing on praise that is effort-based right now is also important. So we're focusing on praising the effort that we see our kids giving, as opposed to the end product that we're seeing from them. So this even goes with the academic piece as well. What effort do we see them putting into it? And I think it is so critical right now to remember that emotional well-being directly influences academic well-being. And human connection is one of the #1 predictors of resilient and emotionally healthy kids. So it is really important that we make our relationship with our children a priority over academics right now. And so I talked at the beginning about how, every day is going to look a little different. And we're going to have some days that we would end that day thinking that today was a great day. It was an easy day. And other days that we might look back on and think, wow, this was a hard day. This was a tough day. Today didn't go quite as easy. And so if we are seeing our kids having a day where they're just really struggling emotionally, that may be a day where we just don't put as much pressure on the academic portion and really take time to sit with our kids and have more conversations about how they're feeling and open that up and really bond with them, because they will do so much better academically when they're
Andrea? I can't hear you.
Then that's certainly going to have a negative impact on their learning. So just allowing yourself as a parent to know that that's also helping their learning, and it's okay to let that take a seat next to just how they're doing emotionally. And then on our last slide here, Holly and I just have a couple of online resources that we thought might be helpful to parents to be able to browse through as needed. And I think at this point, our presentation is finished. We wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time for the question and answer portion.
Thank you guys so much. That was great information to share. We are going to take questions from the YouTube chat. I do want to say to the parents that we will share the slide presentation with everyone so that you can have access to the links that Holly and Andrea shared as well. There is a slight delay between what we're doing and what's recorded at YouTube. So I'm going to just start with a question that was submitted prior to this. And Darren and Lonnie, Emily, everyone, if everyone could join back in, that would be great. I'm actually going to give this question to Mr. Green, and hope that Mrs. Williams will also kind of chime in, and Mr. Barboza, if you have anything. One of the questions is, how are we going to help our 5th graders transition to 6th grade? And then another question is, how are we going to help our 8th graders transition to 9th grade? So with us losing those year-end activities, what are we doing to help those students with those big transitions?
Yeah, I can't speak for all three buildings. I know that all three buildings at first sent out like a question and answer packet through the elementary principals to 5th grade parents. So in that packet, there are probably 24, 25 basic questions that we feel like most 5th graders have. And some of those questions can be centered around, you know, how do I use a locker? How will I get my schedule? How will I know where to go on the first day? So a lot of that communication will come out prior to school starting. Each school sends out a letter to all families. But in that packet in itself, which is called 6th Grade Success, a lot of the questions are answered in there. And then Lonnie, if you wanted to speak as far as East, I'm going to finish up what we've done for South so far. And then if you want to add on, you or Mr. Barboza can. I know for South, we have also sent out 2 different videos to our 5th grade parents. The first video was really information that we would give our 5th graders on the 5th grade orientation day. So Ms. Murdoch, who's our building principal, spoke a little bit. Mr. Boneth, our assistant principal, spoke a little bit, and then I spoke, and I really spoke more in terms of what a basic schedule looks like during the day. I tried to dispel any rumors that kids may have heard, in the past. So really, we talked a lot about things that we actually talked to the 5th graders about when they're there on orientation. That's one of our favorite days of the year, and unfortunately, we were not able to have it the way we wanted to. So anyway, we sent that video out about 2 weeks ago. Last week, all of our teachers in 6th grade, as well as our related arts teachers, did an introductory piece where they introduced themselves and informed the kids what they taught. And then they also either provided a fun fact and or something they really liked about Gahanna Middle School South. So I think it's something actually that we're going to do every year, whether we are in a physical building setting or not. We just thought it was just another way to reach out to parents and to students and for them to be able to place a face with a name and get to know the teachers a little bit, prior to school starting. So this is something that's actually been a positive because we are finding some new ways to help orient students before school starts, despite not being able to have the orientation in a physical manner as we have. Prior to school starting, all 3 schools have a scheduled pickup day where kids can pick up their schedule. They can walk through the building and see period by period where their classes are. And then I can speak for South. 2 days before school starts, we have an ice cream social and an open house. And it again allows kids to walk through the school, find out where their classes are period by period, and then also get to meet their teachers that night as well. So those are many things that we do, and we're always looking to improve. That's one of our big goals every year, is to get our 5th graders to feeling good about coming to school. And it's just something that we really like to do. So Mrs. Williams, I don't know if you wanted to speak, or Mr. Barboza.
I can share a little bit of what we did here. And, I know Middle School South sent a video, and we had talked about what we planned on doing. We ended up doing a Facebook Live video broadcast from the building that did very similar to what Middle School South did in terms of just passing on information. We tried to do some question and answer, a lot like, we're doing with the chat on the side. And then we did some live questions at the end of our presentation as well, as a way to try to connect. And we'll continue to do that and reach out as often as we can in additional ways as we get closer to the beginning of the school year, especially as, when we know what the situation will be at the beginning of the school year, if we're coming back full time or if there's some, modified schedule or something. We're totally unsure of that. So as we get more information on that, we'll increase our opportunities for transition.
And I just want to say too, we are going to be sending out another video, kind of like South did, where some teachers are introducing themselves and saying a little fact or thing about that they like about middle school. That should be coming out in the next week, and possibly a video that one of our current 7th graders she did a Google Hangout with several of our fifth graders from different elementary schools and answered their questions. So that should be coming out as well from East. And also, and I don't know, Mr. Barboza, if you want to touch more on this, but also keep in mind, if there are fifth grade parents out there, we also have been meeting with the fifth grade or elementary principals to talk about needs of students and what what everybody needs for next year and what teachers would be the best fit for people and stuff like that. We talk a lot about what's the best transition for kids. And so no, we are having those meetings. We are trying to get to know information about kids before they come so we can meet them where they are and so we can help them right from the beginning. And also that's the same going from 8th to high school. We do talk to the high school and go over some.
Lonnie, can you talk a little bit louder? People are having a hard time hearing you. Can you just talk a little bit louder?
Better. I'm sorry. My voice is so quiet. I'm sorry, you guys. What I was saying was we have more things coming out for fifth graders, some videos that will be coming out in the next week or so. And then also we do meet with the fifth grade elementary school principals and go over what is needed with those fifth graders, because every class is different and some students need special things. And so we try to learn all those things before they come so we can be prepared for them when they do arrive. Also, we do the same thing from 8th going to the high school. We talk to the high school teachers and administrators and try to, front load some of that information so that everybody can have a smooth transition to middle school or from middle school.
Thank you. Ms. Vargas, you're kind of the only one here from Middle School West. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add as far as Middle School West helping with the transitions of 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th. Yeah, you're muted.
God, I've done enough of these that I should know that by now. I was just gonna say, I talk a lot with Shayla Oates, who's the school counselor at West. I know she's putting things out to the current 5th graders, same as at South and East. In fact, I think they've worked a lot together, so there's a lot of really similar information being shared. Our 6th grade team also has done a presentation introducing everybody. And I know for our 8th graders going into 9th grade, that's going to look pretty similar I imagine no matter when we go back, that freshmen are still going to have that day to themselves to, get to see everything. I think something that I've been talking with a lot of students about is, if anything, this time has really made us quite flexible. Like, we thought we were initially going to be on break for 3 weeks, and then it was 9, and we don't know. So maybe as a silver lining that will kind of help with transitioning. Like, we've been through so much, like everyone's just excited to get back and know that the teachers at every grade level, they are ready to meet the students where they're at as they are every year, so that students can feel normal and feeling anxious, but also hopefully maybe even feel a little bit more excited to just see everybody.
So that takes us to a question that we just got on the YouTube chat, and that is, what if a student has not completed all distance learning activities prior to the end of the school year? So we did have several parents ask as questions with the registration too, that they've had kids that are just not engaging, that they're really, really, really struggling. Kids who maybe were high achieving students and now just are not engaging. And that's not an uncommon thing to hear right now. I personally have talked to parents whose kids were never on anyone's radar because they were always doing great at school, but have just really struggled during this time. So if you want to raise your hand, if you want to take this question of, like what will we do with those students who did not complete their work during this last 9 weeks? No one wants to take it. Okay.
I can talk just a little bit about that. The teachers are really trying to reach out to the kids and the parents this week to try to get as much work done as they can, so we can, we want everybody to be successful. We want the kids to be participating. And we've done, sorry, I'm getting a million texts, so that dinging you're probably hearing is just my text going off. Sorry about that. But that's what we want, is we want kids to be successful. And there has been families that are going through a lot in this time right now due to a wide variety of things, whether that's illness in their family or change of job circumstance or a million things. And a lot of, it's kind of timely because this is, all of that is affecting, the parents' mental health, the kids' mental health, and that tends to put, the math homework assignment in a lower importance on the scale of what's needed. And so we try to be sympathetic with those things. At the same time, we want kids to learn and grow, and that's part of what they're connected to school with in the first place. So I would say what we're doing, it's different from family to family, and the teachers are reaching out and trying to communicate. And every chance we get, we're trying to help students get to a satisfactory grade. There will be, if there is no contact, there's no work being done, obviously some kids are going to have to get a U for the fourth 9 weeks. And then we would try to have a plan to, once we're back in contact physically with the kids, back in school in the fall, we'll try to have an intervention plan to try to keep them caught up as much as possible.
And I would add to that, I think that the district's stance just overall is similar to what Mr. Barboza said, just showing grace as much as we can. We understand that there are situations that are preventing kids from being able to move forward for whatever reason. But we really are trying our best to reach every kid. I know I work at the high school level with students that have struggled to complete work, and we have a lot of people reaching out and trying to get them to a point where at the very least they pull that satisfactory grade. And then if they don't, like Mr. Barboza said, our plan would be to really try to help support them at the beginning of next year. That takes us to another question that came as part of the registration process. And that is, a couple parents have said, what do we tell our kids about next year? What do we say to them? And I'm going to give this one to Andrea. How do we help them understand the unknown, and how do we help them when we don't have the answers ourselves?
I think that being honest with our kids right now about that is important. I think that when we don't know the answers, it is absolutely okay to tell them that we don't know, that there are a lot of unknowns right now. And I think that this is a time where we can give our kids an opportunity and model for them how to cope with uncertainty, because that's really is the stage that we are at right now. I think allowing them, knowing it's important for them to know that they can come to you with any questions that they have at any point in time, and to open that up to them and take the time to really ask them what their questions are, and answer those questions based on what it is that you do know. And like I said, when you don't know, I think it is okay to say that you don't know, and maybe share some of the things that you have heard, that may be possibilities for what that could look like next year, but then also reinforcing to them that even though there is a lot that's out of our control, we do still have a lot that's in our control, and having conversations about what is in our control that we can focus on so that we can, really work to feel better about the situations. What are those coping skills that we can use? How can we make sure that we are doing our part to stay safe? Those pieces I think are important as well to help our kids focus on those. And I think that typically helps to ease anxiety when we can focus on what's in our control.
And I would add too, we don't know. Gahanna Jefferson Schools, we do not know what next year is going to look like. Our superintendent doesn't know what next year is going to look like. We wish that we had more information so that you could give concrete answers to your children, but we don't have the answers. And, we're all, many of us on this panel are parents, and we're in similar boats having the same conversations with our children to say, we have to wait and get more information before we know what next year is going to look like. But in the meantime, we're here, and how can I support you? This next question, I think, is a very common thing that parents are seeing. Holly, I'm going to give this one to you. The parent wrote and said that they feel like their child's regressing socially, that their child has severe ADHD and is playing with toys that he used to play with, but kind of grew out of, and is going back to playing with things that are not really age appropriate. The parents would like to know, should they do something about this? Is this something that they should be worried about?
That's a really great question. I think that's not that uncommon. And I think Andrea spoke a little bit to that during her presentation or when she was speaking. I think anxiety and stress, chronic stress, can cause kids to regress a little bit, and that makes them feel more comfortable and more safe when they move back towards some of those things when they were younger. So I definitely would just talk with your young person about that. Talk to them about what it's like to play with those toys again, what it makes them feel like, and just have an open conversation and kind of unpack what's going on with them. I think that's the best thing you can do. And then depending on what they share with you, you can move forward and figure out how to support them in the best way. I don't advocate, telling them absolutely you can't do that, you're too young or you're too old for that. I would just meet them, like Andrea said, where they're at in that moment and where they are at right now emotionally, and then just try to unpack that and find out what's behind it, what feelings are behind it.
So Andrea and Holly both talked about kind of relaxing the rules on screen time in your house during this time. So one of the questions that just came from our YouTube chat was, what is a realistic screen time? What should parents be looking for when it comes to that? So I don't know, Emily, do you want to take this one? What talking about realistic screen times for children?
Sure. I'm just speaking right from personal experience and from having the different Google Meets that I've done with students, and my own screen time is definitely up. I think making sure that, like was talked about in the presentation, making sure that screen time is definitely split up with breaks. So if that's going on a walk, obviously right now or for the next week and a half, getting that schoolwork in, doing some kind of family exercise, getting some fresh air, that sort of thing. I would say also from my Google Meets with students, there's a lot of them that are staying up really late, that a lot of them have pretty much turned nocturnal. I think that's also, it's just a fun thing for them to text at night or FaceTime. I think watching that is a good idea. Maybe taking the phone at night, which they will not like, but at least just giving them a break in the nighttime, and making sure, like I said, maybe taking it periodically or helping them learn how to self-monitor when they're doing work while having their cell phone. Again, that's something that I feel like a lot of adults that I know are also struggling with at this time too. It's a constant distraction. So helping them learn how to deal with that, but definitely allowing them to stay connected with their peers, because that is how they're connecting right now.
Andrea, did you want to add anything? Is there such a thing as too much? That's one of the questions that someone asked. Like, should we say you can't have more than this many hours a day?
Or what they're using the screen time for. So if they're on their screen talking to friends or FaceTiming friends or relatives and socializing, then that might be okay. But if they're using the screen to do other things that are not pro-social or healthy, then you would have to start to figure out a way to limit it. So I think it depends largely on what they're doing on the screen. And if Andrea wants to add to that.
Sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree that balance is really important when it comes to screen time or to anything that we may be talking about or that we are doing. So I do think that it's important for every day to have some balance, that we're not just spending our entire day or allowing our kids to spend pretty much their entire day in front of the screen. I would say that yes, that probably, I would say that would be unhealthy, that would not be something that would be a positive thing for our kids. However, it's really hard, I think, to give an exact amount of time, because I do think each day may look a little different based on your schedule and what you have going on. So when we talked about making a realistic schedule for your day and kind of being forgiving of yourself and maybe needing to relax that screen time, I think there may be some days where you know, the majority of the day, just kind of that is what happened because you were in survival mode. You had a lot that you needed to get done. That was what your kids were choosing to do at that time, and you allowed that. I think what you have to be most careful of is that you don't fall into a pattern that for weeks, that's what every day has looked like for your child. I think that there may be some days, yes, that look like that, and we might have to just recognize that that is what that day looked like to kind of get through it. But I would certainly caution parents to make sure not to get into that habit of every day my child is just spending almost all of their time in front of the screen, and making sure that they do have some breaks and they do have some balance.
Thank you, Andrea. Screen times are always the hardest, especially with this age. Our next question is from our Google chat. Ms. Williams is going to take this. Do you have suggestions for things can do on Zoom or in group chats that can help them connect? So her children are saying that they have nothing to talk about. So something that's beyond charades, any other ways to kind of encourage them to be able to converse, Lonnie?
So I think it's important as a parent, obviously, just to kind of lead our children in really positive socialization right now. I think it's hard for a lot of kids and adults for that matter to know how to interact online and on video all the time. But I think for me as a parent and with some of my kids at the middle school, it's been really helpful to give them some prompts of things to kind of ask, or to even give them some games to play. Like I had a couple of students play categories. If you have that or you have access to that, it was actually really fun, and they could do it without having the actual game at their house if not everybody has it. And things like that are really helpful. I think too, I had a couple students doing a book study with each other. I know that's not for everybody, but they were some 6th grade girls, and they picked a book and they decided to read it, and then they would get on and talk about it, and they would get really excited. It would just give them something to look forward to and something that they could bond together with. I think those are important things. I think too, modeling for your child. I try to have conversations with my colleagues or my friends on a daily basis, even if it's just for a short time, or where they're around and they can hear me, and hoping that it's modeling for them. And I think too, even like I have students who like movies, they can get on and talk about a certain movie or watch one and then go back and talk about it. I think too, just finding some things they have in common with their friends and focusing on those topics. But I do think it's important to give kids prompts sometimes and ideas of things to discuss, because otherwise they get a little bit nervous or unsure, and it doesn't go as smoothly. So I think that's a good thing to do. Jokes are fun. I have a lot of boys, especially, who are on telling each other jokes. Even like if I'm on a Google Hangout, it seems to kind of lighten the mood. That's an idea. I know some students are doing like online birthday parties where they play little games. You can get on certain apps and do games or do some activities through that. So those are just some ideas, but I would say this too. If you have family members that you can reach out to and plan those events, or friends that have kids around the same age and you can plan those ahead of time, that is helpful, even though it seems crazy at their age. Sometimes they need that little push. And if you need help with that, like I'm sure all of us as school counselors or mental health specialists, even if you need to reach out to us because you don't know anybody or you don't have a connection with the community, let us know and we can try to set up your child to talk to somebody else or something like that if needed.
Thank you, Lonnie. The next question comes from our YouTube chat. I'm going to give this one to Mr. Green. She says, I have a son. My husband says boys do not do FaceTime chats. Is that true? He is an only child and is really lonely. Should I try to make him do video time to see face to face?
That is a great question. And to be honest with you, I don't have a solid answer other than I would tend to agree that it seems like girls do more FaceTime than boys do. Although I have heard of boys, doing FaceTime, or some type of video chat. I don't know if I would force someone to do that, and anyone else on the panel, you can, agree or disagree or whatever with that. I think I would try to find some kind of opportunity though for that child to at least be able to engage in a face-to-face kind of setting, whether it's, meeting in a driveway and hanging out for a few minutes or doing something so that they can at least, see somebody else, and talk to them other than a family member. If they're just not comfortable using the technology, then maybe a true person-to-person experience might be better. I don't know if anybody else has anything else they want to add to that.
I do. Like I'm at West. I hear a lot about guys, and I guess it's typically girl and guy friends who are FaceTiming. But I do know that guys FaceTime. I also don't want to just. I don't think video games needs any advertising, but that is the way that I hear guys often communicating.
True.
Please don't ask me the specific ones, even though I've been told thousands of times, but when they're on their headsets and they're communicating with each other, I think being able to do an activity, especially when they're the games where they are kind of working together and they're talking, I actually hear a lot of boys saying even like, you know, they do ask each other about their day sometimes, and they have some genuine friendships through that. So I didn't really expect to be talking about gaming as a way to connect necessarily, but I think that that is a way that a lot of our male students do connect with each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I would just add boys can do FaceTime, but like Mr. Green said, is it typical? You know, it just depends on the boy. I work with a lot of boys at the high school that are always on FaceTime. So maybe try it out with, I think someone said in the Google chat, someone that they already know, like a trusted cousin or a relative, and see if they enjoy it and get used to it. The other thing that I think can be helpful, other than like true like gaming like video games, are there's also fun online games that you can play in groups. Like my family and I, we play euchre together and we play it online, and it's something that everyone can sign in from remotely, and you can talk trash and all that stuff. So there's different games out there too that they can play online together that are not necessarily like the video games that we all think about as you know, being a lot for kids to handle.
Even games like Pictionary or Taboo or other type of games where you're kind of forced to talk, as you're playing.
The other question that came up that I want to make sure that we address is a parent asked, is adopting a half-day concept for the student okay as long as they're getting their work done? The worry is, does it send the wrong message and affect them once they get back to school if they know that they've been able to complete their work in half the time that they normally do? Who would like to take this one? Holly, why don't you take it?
I was going to ask you to repeat the question. What is the parent
So
asking?
the question is it okay to adopt a schedule where the child's done with their work in half a day? What they're worried about is that they're sending the message to the child that you can get your work done in half a day, and then they're going to go back to school and have a full day and think that they don't need to work a full day. So is it okay to limit schoolwork to half a day?
Yes, I think that the short answer is yes. I think you're giving your young person the tools to create their own schedule and create some independence over their day-to-day life right now, which I think is really important in building resilience in the young people so that they can get through this disaster, this pandemic that we're in. So I think, yes, allowing them that control, and if they can get their work done half a day, that's perfectly fine and healthy for them to do that. I do not think that they're going to be at any risk. I mean, of course, there'll be a little bit of an adjustment, but I think overall, all of the kids are going to have, and teachers and parents are going to have a big adjustment when we go back, because things are going to be different. And I don't see that as being any different than the other adjustments we're going to have to make when we go back. So I would not worry about that.
And I would add to that Gahanna has structured virtual learning so that it isn't 7 hours of work like when they're at school. So it's intentional that the work should probably take less time than if they're sitting in the actual building. And that's intentional so that kids can survive it and so that parents can survive it. So it is definitely okay if they are getting their work done in a shorter amount of time than they would if they were at school all day. Last question, and then we're going to wrap up. Well, actually two. The first one I'll take. Are there other than our school counselors, are there any local counseling resources? We actually have a resource page for parents, and I will put that link in the presentation so that you all can have that of people that you might reach out to for counseling services for your child. But that question leads right into what warning signs do we need to look for? Like, we understand that kids are going to be stressed out and struggling during this time, but at what point do we need to reach out and ask for professional help? So Andrea, I'll let you take that one.
Okay, I think the biggest one that comes to my mind right away is really looking for any significant changes in behavior. So when you see that your child is losing interest in things that they were previously interested in, if you observe any changes in just their energy level, their sleeping more or sleeping less, those kinds of things should definitely cue you in that that's something that they're struggling. And I also think that it's really important right now to have conversations with our kids often about how they're doing and about how they're feeling, and just opening up that conversation, making sure that they know that they can continue to come to you for support at any point in time. Like I said earlier, our relationships is one of the biggest things to building resilient kids, and really just focusing on that relationship piece, and making sure that your kids have you or another trusted adult that they are able to go to and talk to often about how they are feeling, so that your radar is constantly on kind of where they are. But the biggest one, I think, is really looking for those changes in behavior. If you see, oftentimes when we look at depression or anxiety, it often comes out in our kids as anger. So if we're seeing them just get more irritable and angry more often, there's just a significant change in mood or behavior in that sense, or in what it is that we might typically see them do, then we should definitely be concerned and be making sure that we are available to them and having those conversations and keeping an eye on them.
So I have one last minute question from the YouTube group, just because I said, are there any last minute questions? And we got one. So the parent is asking about free range kids playing together. So what restrictions should we give them? And do we just trust that they'll follow them? So who would like to take this one? I will take it. So we actually have a lot of free range kids in my neighborhood too. We are familiar with that term. And for my family, we have just set the boundary that we're socially distancing. So when the free range kids come to our house and knock on the door, we say, Wilson can't come out and play because we're socially distancing. And then they usually go off and play with other kids. I do have friends, and I don't judge. Like, I really don't judge. People have to make their own decisions during this time. And I think being judgmental and harsh on what other people are doing does not help the situation. But I do have friends who have the free range kids, and they have just said to me, I've said to him, you're not allowed to touch the other kids. You're not allowed to be close to the other kids. You have to keep your distance, but still play. So I think it's really a personal family decision. And I think Andrea talked in the presentation about how middle schoolers, especially, they think they're invincible, and I'm not going to get coronavirus. And even if I do get coronavirus, it's not going to really impact me. But I think if you're struggling with your child, understanding that, to say to them, you could be around someone that doesn't have symptoms. And then if you bring it back to the house, even if you're okay, maybe someone else in the family that gets it wouldn't respond the same way that you do. So helping them kind of understand, and it's a hard concept for kids to understand how that can kind of still impact a whole family system just from them kind of letting down their boundaries. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
I would also add, I have seen some people in my neighborhood get creative and even just set out like beach towels, a certain, the distance apart that they need to be. And so then kids kind of know like that's the area that they have to stay, but they're still able to be outside and kind of stay within that area and see each other in a more physical kind of way than an online format. So there are some ways to get creative in that sense too.
I think similar thing in my neighborhood too. We see a lot of like porch parties, neighborhood porches. I think too, if you, I hear about a lot of like bike rides, students and parents going on bike rides together. And if you know, you've got some neighborhood kids and you want to lead them in a bike ride too, or just kind of help them also practice, to just kind of see how they are. Yeah, going on walks and things and helping them understand like what that 6 foot distance is. And I think the blanket thing and the porches, and there's a lot of stuff you can do to be creative, and hopefully it's going to start to be really warm out here soon tomorrow because we're ready.
Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, we've got the parents in our YouTube chat are sharing ideas with each other of things that they're doing with their kids. So you guys should look at those when we're done because they've got some great ideas as well. We really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you to the panelists and for Holly and Andrea for taking the time to do the presentation. Thank you for all the parents who tuned in and watched it live. We will also have the recording on the landing page that we emailed out for any parents that weren't able to join us today. And we will have presentations later this week. Thursday, we'll be discussing elementary from 2 to 3, and then Friday, we'll be talking about high school from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So if those areas interest you, please join us then. So thank you again for your time. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to your building school counselor, mental health specialist, myself, or a building principal. All right, thank you.